Perfect segue.
So, audience, we heard from a couple of you about why this matters, the so what, why should I care, right? So, when we're thinking about the audience, who are you speaking to? And oftentimes, as folks in academic institutions, we tend to have our audience to be each other, other folks who are working in this space. But when we're thinking about the larger question of capital W, who, it could be anyone. It could be funding agencies, it could be policymakers in government, it could be employers, clients, collaborators, neighbors, friends, family, colleagues, right? So anyone could be your audience.
This is like our multi-pointed compass. I know we have said general audience, but technically it doesn't exist. So we just put a couple of things that you should consider. So if we start at the top at like 12 o'clock, right? Are they older or are they a child? That impacts the language you're going to use in their education. Do they, from a do they have the opposite perspective of you, or are you already on the same page? You're already in the same field? Do they have advanced knowledge of your field, or they have an evolving, fairly rudimentary knowledge base? Is English their first language, or is it in French, or is it in another language all together? Um, and how, like, are you talking to a big group? Are you talking to like a gigantic audience? Are you talking to an individual? Very different way you'll tailor your message. Do you come from the same culture, right? In certain cultures, it is not appropriate to make eye contact. Or do you have to go out and research a little bit more if you're being invited to speak in a different country? Um, what are their interests, right? Is it a public, is what you're talking about a public interest, or is it a private interest? And then we kind of talk about science fluency. So again, these are only some of the things you have to think about, but when you start getting invited to go overseas, like a lot of these things, you can't do the same thing.
Or even right here in Montreal, depending on the community that you work with or work in, the way that they have access to this information or understand your information will vary from place to place.
This is just a little quick snippet of the fact that how people perceive the issue will also affect how you talk to them about the message. And across Canada, there are so many different perceptions. So this was a survey by CIHR on a report on Canadian values. So in general, older adults tended to care more about aging and retiring. Rural Canadians cared more about population density. Albertans had very strong opinions about regional policy issues, and citizens born in Canada had a lot more feelings and values about immigration status than immigrants.
So the way that issues are perceived very much vary depending on the values and beliefs that your audience will hold. So depending on what you're speaking about, that might change the way that you speak about certain things. So I'm thinking oftentimes there's a really great science communicator called Tim Calfield. Maybe you've heard of him. He's based out of the University of Alberta. When he goes and speaks, he speaks to lots of different audiences. So he was telling me the other day that he went to Southern California to speak with farmers. And so the way that he talks about science and agriculture is very different in that space where folks tend to be a little bit more um, have certain values that may not necessarily be applied to folks who are working in more urban settings, right? So the urban rural piece, for example, could play a role in how your information is appreciated or accessed or understood.
And that just all this thought exercises to say you change your tone, you change your cadence, you change your speed, you change the emotion you're conveying, the language, your key messaging, how you frame it, and your goals, depending on who you're talking to.
And you kind of did that when you were doing the confidence exercise, right? You were speaking to someone and you kind of had an idea of why they should care about it, and then you tailored with your hands, with your tone, with your emotions, how they should understand your message. And that takes us to framing. So that's very similar to what we did earlier, but essentially framing is going back to the bi-directional component that we were talking about. How do you find commonality to bridge your message and your content with your audience so that you're not just throwing information at them, but can frame it in a way where they can understand why this matters to them. So here are a couple of questions that might be helpful for you when you're reflecting on how can you frame your message. So the first one is, how should my audience think about me/my work? Is it personally relevant? Is it an economic issue? Is it a policy issue? Is it a social issue? So framing it into that core message there. How do I think they already think about the issue? Is it covered by the media they consume? So we showed you a couple of headlines at the beginning of this workshop. Is it a hot topic right now? Is there misinformation around it? And if so, the way you're going to talk about it is quite different. What do I include and exclude, right? What parts do I define or contextualize? What parts do I leave out to avoid confusion? We saw a lot of that during COVID as well, where scientists, for example, wanted to explain all of the limitations to a particular study, and that confused a lot of people. Now, we're not saying not to be transparent. Absolutely not. We do need to be transparent. It's more, how do you frame it in a way that you're not overwhelming folks with so much information that they leave out more confused than when we first started speaking to them? Are there particular communication techniques that resonate better? So we have visual and verbal here, but you can think about other approaches. Should it be on TikTok? Should it be digital? Should it be an infographic? So lots of different ways that you should communicate. And then how do I make it easy for them to take action depending on your ask? So if you're speaking to a funding agency, then your ask will be very different than if you're speaking to a potential collaborator. And so just being very clear and providing that action path so that they know what to do and what you're asking them to do to help you do more of your work.